You've probably been told that your time is extremely valuable, that you should seize the day and that every second counts. However, as an economist, extremely valuable isn't a very satisfying answer to the question of what is time worth? What is the actual numerical value of a certain amount of time? And is this even a question that we can accurately answer? The first question to ask is why? Why do we want to know what time is worth? Well, other than it being an interesting concept to think about, there are actually a lot of practical situations where this information is useful. One such situation is when a government is deciding on spending huge sums of money on large transport infrastructure projects. A key benefit in developing high-speed rail, creating new airports, or building motorways is that these projects help to save you time. With better transport, we can get from point A to point B faster. This means we have more time to spend on the things we actually want to do at our final destination. However, transport is a notoriously expensive thing for a government to invest in. HS2, the controversial high-speed rail development in the UK, was originally estimated to cost around £36 billion in 2010. More recently, some estimates have been at £88 billion or even higher. So if we're looking at spending these huge sums on transport infrastructure projects, we need to get some idea of the benefit that people are going to get from them. Sure, we may know that a new railway line reduces every journey by 1 hour, but how do we compare that hour of time to £100 billion of money? This is a key aspect of social cost-benefit analysis. This is where we need to quantify in monetary terms the value of every cost and every benefit of a project, where we're assigning some value to an object that isn't traded in a market like time. We call this a shadow price. Here we're effectively looking at what price we might assign to buy 1 hour of time. This allows us to decide whether the benefit of the project is greater than the cost. If the benefit outweighs the cost, we can happily go ahead with the project. So, how do we go about measuring the value of time? This may seem like a tricky thing to do, as time isn't a tangible good or service that we see traded in markets for money. Or is it? When we think of labour markets or jobs, we can think of this as people trading their time for money. I will work for 8 hours in a day, and in return you will give me some amount of money. It is of course a little bit more complicated than this because you trade more than just time during your job. You also exert effort or energy during your working hours. A job may be dangerous and you may even be risking your life. Consider a soldier in a war. They're not only giving their time today, but risking their life for tomorrow, and may have mental health conditions such as PTSD in the future. The money they earn thus doesn't only cover their time, but they also receive hazard pay to take on this risk. In the other direction, we might not only receive money from our job. For one thing, we might actually enjoy the work we do, so we get some satisfaction back from it. People volunteering at jobs doesn't mean they value their time as nothing, but rather that they get some value other than money from the work they do. But we might also get other non-monetary benefits from work, like healthcare, a company car, or the promise of higher earnings in the future from a promotion. There are a number of other factors to throw into the mix, which mean that labour markets don't just show us a straight swap of time for money. But this does largely come down to our definitions. Some people will argue that the value of our time is the value of what we can produce in that time. For example, the number of things we can sell in an hour, or the value of gold we can mine in 1 day. This is a productivity view of time. When we think in terms of productivity, our hourly wage is a pretty good estimate of the value of our time, as economic theory tells us that our wage should equal our marginal productivity in a free market. The other way of looking at this would focus on the value of the actual time itself, ignoring what we do with that time. This would ask us, how much would you be willing to pay to get some more time? Or equivalently, how much would you be willing to receive to lose some of your time? Would you accept £5 million to lose 5 years from your life expectancy? What about £5 billion? And what about 20 years? We can call this the leisure view of the value of time. And actually, the leisure view of time is the value of the time itself, because in this case we actually do trade time directly for money. Problem solved, right? Well, not really. The issue is that this isn't really an observed behaviour that we see in the real world. We do see people doing things like paying for life-saving treatment, which may give them some more time, but in this case we're not really paying for some exact length of time. We don't tend to buy medical treatment with the goal of living exactly 5 or 10 more years. We buy it just to live for as long as we can. This means we can't extract our shadow price that says people are willing to pay some amount for each additional hour or year of life, as they aren't paying for an amount of time, they're paying for their life. This is a topic for another video, as some government projects do also put a value on life, so subscribe for a video on that in the future. This leaves us with the productivity measure of time as the one which we can quite easily measure. We just have to ask how much value people can generate in their time. How productive are we? This is a much easier question to answer. In fact, there are lots of ways this has been measured, as this is a very important question in economics. For the sake of this video, let's go back and focus on what the world of transport has to say about the productivity value of time. In a study for Network Rail, it was estimated that the business value of saving 1 hour of time was £39.60 for classic rail. It was £30.20 for high-speed rail, and £36.10 for air travel. But what does this actually mean? Well, this says that businesses, on average, would be willing to pay £39.60 so that their employee could have a 1 hour shorter rail journey. They would also pay £36.10 for a 1 hour shorter journey by air. Why are businesses willing to pay this amount? Well, it's because if their employee's train journey is 1 hour shorter, in theory, this means that they can spend an extra hour at their final destination, the office. We might interpret this as saying that the average person is £39.60 more productive in their office than on a conventional train, and £36.10 more productive in an office than on an aeroplane. These values vary because people have different levels of productivity on different modes of transport. For example, it might be easier to get some work done in business class on a plane than on an overcrowded train that you can't even get a seat on. It is much easier to do work on a high-speed train, as these tend to have Wi-Fi, plug sockets and tables to put your laptop, whereas conventional older trains likely do not have these things. It is worth noting that these numbers are highly disputed. There are lots of studies out there which work out the value of transport times. Some use trains, while others look at how much people are willing to spend on toll booths to save time on their car journeys. No matter what method you use, you're going to run into the same problems. Using this idea of productivity is very subjective. Going back to our HS2 example, initial estimates of the benefits here made an assumption that time spent on trains was not productive at all. They thus assume that no one ever works on the existing trains, so every hour saved is an extra hour that is spent working. Obviously, this is not true. For one thing, people do work on existing trains. Also, how can we be sure that an hour saved off a journey will be spent working? What is to stop that person from spending that extra hour lying in bed or watching a movie? Another reason that this method may be unpopular is that it depends on who is travelling. It puts a huge emphasis on high-earning business people and very little value on people who are travelling for fun, like holidays or to visit friends and family. Just because it is difficult to estimate the value of time spent with family doesn't mean we should just ignore it. This, though, summarises the problem with placing a value on time. All time is not equal. I might value my time on holiday more than I value my time at work. Someone else's time might be more valuable than mine, because they're using it to do something better than I use my time for. So while I have given some examples of values that an academic study has given for time, these values don't actually mean a whole lot. They're just there to serve a practical purpose in the context of transport. We have to cut some corners and make some assumptions if we are to get a ballpark estimate to help us make decisions regarding big infrastructure projects. We will have to do this estimation exercise again and again every time we want to know what time is worth, because clearly the value of time is not a constant. Time is much more meaningful than how much work we can do in it. But for economic purposes, right now, looking at our productivity might be just as good a measure as any of what time is worth. Thanks for watching. Please do drop a like rating if you found it interesting, leave your thoughts, feedback and video suggestions in the comments, and subscribe to add some econ to your subscription feed.